If you happen to be on the market for a high-tier premium aircraft to grind out the American air tech tree, you're going to be faced with quite a dilemma, as there are now three high-tier premium packs above 12.0, the F4S, the F-18C Early, and the humble F-20. Of these three, it's very understandable why you might overlook the F-20 as a potential choice. This thing doesn't exactly have a great reputation due to the fact that it was BR 12.7 on launch, and therefore basically dead on arrival until it got bumped down to 12.3. And also, it can only carry two BVR missiles compared to the six on the F-4S and F-18. I'm here to say, though, that having played all three of these aircraft very recently, this is hands down my favorite of the three. Don't take that as your answer for which of these three you should buy, though, as there's a bit of nuance in answering that question. If you're still very new to the game, I'd still recommend the F-4S. That aircraft, if played properly, is the most brain-dead and noob-proof of the three in my opinion. I already have a skill issue guide dedicated to it, which I will link in the description. The F-18, meanwhile, is good for its battle rating, and also carries a lot more weaponry, so honestly, it might actually be a better grinder overall just due to its higher kill potential. But in full up tiers against 13.7s, which it sees a lot of, you are going to get your shit absolutely fucking rocked, especially if you're new to the game. Link to that skill issue guide will also be in the description. What makes the F-20 my favorite, though, comes purely down to flight performance. If you learn to play it correctly, this airframe is a fantastic dogfighter, with Mirages and F-15s being the only aircraft you really don't stand a chance against if the pilot knows what they're doing. The F-20 is fast, very maneuverable, climbs and accelerates great, but the characteristic that really sets it apart comes from its F5 heritage, and that's its high-speed energy retention. In case you haven't seen the guide I made for it, the F5 has a very useful ability to maintain its energy while turning when flown above 400 miles per hour or so. This requires a bit of discipline, but if used correctly, it makes the airframe absolutely outstanding for pulling off the energy traps. While this is definitely a trait you can make good use of, I still would not recommend playing this thing like it's just a roided out F5, even though technically that's exactly what it is. As for one, there are just way too many BVR missiles flying around to make my F5 strategy viable in this vehicle, and also I feel it wastes the potential of its armament a bit. Speaking of armament, let's take a look at its kit. The two types of missiles you get are AIM-9Ls and AIM-7Fs, weapons which I'm sure most of you who are familiar with top-tier American aircraft are well accustomed to. I will also say subjectively that its radar seems very reliable and tends to hold lock quite well. The inner pylons can hold either two 9Ls or one 7F, and I prefer to use both for 7Fs. While AIM-9Ls are very easy to flare if someone sees you coming, 7Fs are nearly impossible to dodge if you're able to position yourself correctly. Now you may question why I would lean into BVR when this thing has so many fewer missiles compared to its counterparts, but I think this will make more sense once I explain my strategy. You see, whereas the F-4S and the F-18 are not aircraft well known for outstanding speed and acceleration, the F-20 is an absolute rocket. This thing will easily crack Mach in a climb and can straight line at Mach 1.5 at around 5,000 meters. This means that while it may have fewer missiles, the missiles it does carry can be used to absolutely devastating effect if employed with care. Because of this, my opening move in every match is to go and hunt the enemy space climbers. There isn't one precise way to do this, but what I like to generally do is climb at 10 degrees out to the right of the airfield until you're just below contrail height, which is around 5,500-ish meters most of the time, and then just start accelerating. If you can get fast enough, you can sometimes actually sneak up on the enemy space climbers from below and off to the side while they still have their radars pointed up, since they don't expect anyone to actually be able to get into firing range this soon, and you can absolutely blindside them. Something I also like to do is to keep my radar off until I get close enough to them to surprise them even more. Because of your limited number of missiles, I would recommend holding your fire until you're 15 kilometers away from an enemy or less. Even though the 7Fs can hit shots from double that distance, you don't have the luxury of sustaining a BVR fight with repeated launches, and a 7F launched at Mach 1.4 or above from that short of a range is very nearly undodgeable. I would also advise you not cave into the temptation to fire down on targets hugging the deck in the early stages of the match. While I would recommend doing this with vehicles that have more missiles to spare, you need to be conserving your shots for targets with the highest hit probability possible. Once you've expended all your 7Fs and ideally killed any enemy space climbers, you're going to want to start trying to get a sense of where the enemy team is. Because of your limited armament and your outstanding performance as a dogfighter, you want to try and take on lone enemies if at all possible. This means transitioning from high altitude to treetop height, since fighting on the deck will ensure that you are able to exploit your excellent thrust and energy retention, whereas many enemies you may face will struggle to even hang in the air. While on your way down, firing your 9Ls onto groups of enemies below you can also be effective, but these missiles are still very easy to flare, so the success of this relies on the enemy not seeing you. The weapon you ideally want to be relying on is your guns. Like I mentioned earlier, the F-20 is an excellent dogfighter and actually has two different strategies it can employ in a dogfight that are likely to be able to energy trap just about anyone you encounter. And to demonstrate this, let's take a look at some dogfights. The first one, funny enough, is actually against an enemy F-20, and this is a good reminder of why knowing your airframe is very important. He seems to have been trying to confuse me by locking me up with his radar while firing a heat seeker at me. This can sometimes confuse people, and it's the reason I like to have both chaff and flare selected to drop while I'm fighting on the deck. Anyways, I'm going to immediately pop up and attempt to catch him in an energy trap. Like I mentioned earlier, this airframe loses very little energy in a turn as long as you can keep your speed above 400 miles per hour, so I'm using my W and S keys to turn little by little instead of just pulling in all the way. Unfortunately for him, I don't think he got the memo on this fact. Once I see he's starting to drop out of the air, I'm going to take that as my cue that he's out of energy, so I'm going to pull in as hard as I can, and I'm going to hose him down with my cannons. Let this be a lesson that sometimes pulling in as hard as you can is not always the best thing to do. This next game is a 6 kill, though really a 7 kill. I just happened to have my last kill stolen by a rather unexpected third party at the end. Also, I got this footage during a bout of insomnia very early in the morning, so you're going to see some absolutely brain-dead plays for me at certain points in this. Apologies in advance. That being said, I think seeing what I did wrong is pretty instructive, so hopefully you can bear with my terrible aim and painfully bad use of AIM-9Ls. We're going to start off by nearly getting skewered by this F-4E, which I'm luckily able to notch at the last second, followed up by teaching this MiG-23 the hard way that, yes, in fact, even at this altitude, the F-20 can swing its nose around ludicrously fast. After this, you're going to watch my half-asleep ass get very discombobulated looking for that dot on the minimap, only to realize it's actually the F-4E above and behind me. This looks like a pretty bad situation, but I'm not going to panic. With this thing's crazy amount of thrust, I can basically just pull it up and have it sit on its tail without stalling. From there, I can change the axis of my turn, and just like that, I am now on this fellow's tail. Unfortunately, I can't quite pull onto his tail and into a gunshot just yet, but I think you can probably guess where this is going, so I'm just going to skip ahead a bit. But to recap, I stupidly waste my 9Ls thinking they might track if he left his burner on, and also miss a few gunshots because I'm bad. Anyways, here we are a few vertical loops later. It did take me some time to bleed him out of energy since he did actually start out at an advantage, but it's an F4, we all knew how this was going to play out. And in this case, when he pulls back up into the vertical, I'm going to have enough energy to follow him, and I'm going to finally end this. For our next victim, we have a slightly more dangerous opponent, an F4S. These guys have the Agile Eagle upgrade package and can actually turn quite well at high speed, so I'll need to be a little more wary of this guy, at least at the beginning. I am also all out of missiles, so I'm going to rush down to the deck to try and get to safety from his missiles, and then try to force him to merge. What he should have done here after the merge is gone vertical and popped combat flaps to try and throw a Hail Mary and make me overshoot, but by choosing to rate fight me like this, he's basically sealed his fate. He is actually going to do something quite smart here, though, and use one of my favorite tactics against me. He's going to fly straight and wait for me to think I have a perfect shot lined up, and then immediately roll out of the way. This is going to buy him a few extra seconds of life before I respond to this annoyance by shaving the tip of his wing off. We're not quite out of the woods yet, though. I can now see we're getting pinged from off on our left on our RWR. Continuing the theme of each opponent getting slightly stronger than the last, this time it's a JA-37D who appears to have a full missile loadout, so I'm going to hide behind this hill and force him to get as close to me as possible. The JA-37 is quite a maneuverable aircraft, but I know we have him very well beat in terms of acceleration, thrust, and energy retention. I get a little overconfident here and only pull out of the way of his guns at the last second. I'm then going to pull directly in on top of him and nearly get a shot in here, but my crew isn't aced, so I don't have quite the G tolerance to make it happen. He's making the same mistake as that F-20 from earlier and just trying to pull in on me as hard as he can instead of conserving his energy, but much like my pilot, I too am teetering on the edge of consciousness, and I nearly choke the fight right here. Luckily, he has no energy left and isn't really able to control his nose enough to get a shot off into me, so I'm going to use the opportunity to turn his canopy into Swiss cheese. With him out of the way, I then spot one of the last two enemies alive on the other team. I do attempt to pursue him, but we end up both going back to base to rearm. I'll let you watch me choke on some 7F shots while I talk a little bit about this matchup. For those of you not familiar, the J7E may just look like another MiG-21 variant, however, this thing is much more dangerous in a dogfight than just about any other fish bed. This is because, in addition to its upgraded engine, it also features redesigned wings, which change it from a flying air brake into a fighter with energy retention good enough to earn it the nickname Baby F-16 by some in the community. I've actually played a good bit of this aircraft, but even I end up underestimating it here. I had figured that he'd pulled so hard dodging that 7F that surely I must be in a good position to energy trap him. Unfortunately, I get a little overzealous and end up finding myself right about a kilometer off his nose in perfect PL5 shot range. I start to panic a bit here, as even I'm not really sure the best way to shake him off, and in fact, I had never even really contemplated this matchup, but seeing as trying to energy trap him clearly isn't working, I decide to go back into the vertical once again. While the J7E might be a match for me in a rate fight, it's that great thrust-to-weight ratio of the F-20 that allows it to just pull up and out of these situations, even at the edge of stall speed. While 4th-gen fighters at higher battle ratings might be able to keep up with you here, anything less modern than that is going to be stuck halfway into a stall, huffing and puffing. So as I come down out of this loop and start to get my energy back, as well as start rapidly swinging my nose in towards him, he's still struggling to get his speed back up. I don't quite pull enough lead to get a shot on him, but that's okay. I have all the time I need, so I'm just going to go straight back up into the vertical. Now, I notice he actually has his burner off here, which I'm not really sure as to the reason why, but in any case, he definitely should have kept that on. Now here comes the part where my skill issue really comes into play. I'm going to try and surprise him with a missile shot, but that doesn't work, and then I'm going to completely choke a perfect gunshot. I'm not sure if packet loss came into play on this, but in any case, now you get to see what I mean when I say I suck at this game 95% of the time. It's requiring all of my willpower here not to start punching my computer after this, but my willpower holds for now. He's still at a lower energy state, so I'm going to return to the vertical so that I can come back down on top of him again. And this time, despite having way less of a shot, I'm somehow still able to hit him. But unfortunately a hit is all I'm going to get, and after observing him for a few seconds I realize he hasn't actually received any significant damage. What's worse is that, with him now in the vertical, he has the opportunity to pop combat flaps and come down on top of me to just full commit trade. I'm not actually sure why he doesn't do this, but in any case, I am not going to take my chances. I'm going to choke another missile shot and then spray him down with my guns to finally get a crit on him. The way this fight is going is starting to remind me of a fucking Ace Combat boss fight with how many hits I apparently need to bring this guy down with, but luckily the second hit seems to have actually damaged him, so growing impatient, I'm going to simply pull in on top of him and finally finish him off. To be honest, this guy kinda made an ass out of me just by lasting as long as he did, but in any case, the point is, even if some enemies might be able to counter your energy retention and make it hard for you to pull an energy trap off, you still have the option of going into the vertical and trying to shake them that way. Our last opponent is an F4S who I've merged with, who is engaging me in a vertical loop. However, Agile Eagle upgrade package or otherwise, the F4 Phantom is still a brick, so he's going to get a little overly ambitious, and thus the squirrels are going to steal my kill. Anyways, guys, I know I've gone way over my normal time limit, but I really wanted to show you guys that match because I thought it was quite instructive. Hopefully I've made my case for why the F-20 is a great fighter. That's going to be all for this one. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Check out the videos linked in the description for more similar content, and I'll see you guys in the next one.